When we talk about bodybuilding legends, one name always comes up: Dorian Yates. Known by the nickname The Shadow, he didn't just compete, he redefined the sport in the 90s. His presence on stage was almost intimidating, marked by a muscle density the world had never seen before. Dorian didn't need to stay in the spotlight all the time. He showed up only at contests, dominated, and then disappeared again, just like a true shadow that always left its mark. But Dorian's impact goes way beyond his physique. He was the missing link between two massive eras of the sport. On one side, you had Lee Haney, who owned the 80s with elegance and classic proportions. On the other, Ronnie Coleman, who would go on to rule the 2000s with raw power and freakish size. Right in between stood Dorian Yates, the bridge that launched a new era, the age of the mass monsters, bodybuilders who pushed size and conditioning to an entirely new level. From 1992 to 1997, he racked up 6 straight Mr. Olympia titles. That streak not only cemented his spot among the all-time greats, but it also made his philosophy a turning point in bodybuilding. Every time he walked on stage, the crowd saw something they'd never seen before. About 265 pounds, 120 kilos, of razor-sharp, perfectly balanced muscle, conditioned to the absolute max. It was a blend of sheer size and insane detail that seemed impossible until he made it real. What's even more impressive is that Dorian didn't just unveil a new physique, he introduced a whole new way of training. While most guys back then were still grinding through endless sets and reps, Yates flipped the script with his high-intensity approach, known as HIIT, high-intensity training. The idea was simple: fewer sets, but with an all-out effort that bordered on insane. His training style was immortalized in the documentary and book Blood and Guts. The title says it all. It wasn't about how long you spent in the gym, but about how much you were willing to give in every single set. That mindset didn't just change his own career. It went on to inspire generations of athletes and gym rats around the globe. What made Dorian stand out was exactly that. He did things differently. He wasn't chasing aesthetics alone. He was chasing efficiency. Every workout, every rep, every tiny detail of his prep was calculated to squeeze out the maximum results. That's what made him not just a champion, but a visionary. How many times in life have you asked yourself if you're just following the crowd instead of carving your own path? That was Yates' edge, and that's why his legacy is still alive today. Dorian Yates wasn't just the guy who won 6 Olympias in a row. He was the man who redefined the entire standard of modern bodybuilding. If there's one word that describes Dorian beyond champion, it's discipline. While a lot of athletes soaked up fame through magazine covers, events, and parties, Dorian chose a completely different road. For over a decade, he lived like a monk of bodybuilding, dedicating every minute of his life to training, nutrition, and recovery. No distractions, no excess, just laser-focused commitment to becoming the best. That reclusive lifestyle wasn't by accident, it was strategy. He believed that any energy wasted outside of the athlete's routine meant less progress on stage. So, while others chased the spotlight, Dorian vanished, trained in silence, and reappeared only to collect titles. That approach didn't just reinforce his nickname, The Shadow, it created a near-mythical aura around his name. One of the most fascinating aspects of his mindset was the methodical way he tracked progress. Dorian kept detailed journals logging every workout, every meal, even how his body reacted to small changes. Those notes became his compass, allowing precise adjustments instead of random guesses. How many of us actually keep track of our day-to-day with that level of rigor? That simple but powerful habit was one of his keys to success. For Dorian, bodybuilding was never just about looks. It was an individual, almost lonely challenge. He believed there was no one-size-fits-all manual. Every body is unique. Every response is different. That's why each athlete had to discover their own formula. He pushed against the idea of simply copying someone else's workout. Instead, he encouraged learning to listen to your body, experimenting, and adjusting until you find what works for you. His philosophy can be summed up in one line: to achieve something unbelievable, you've got to put in unbelievable work. For him, nothing great could come from average effort. That mindset ran through everything he did. Not just his brutal workouts, but his entire routine. Going to bed early, measuring every meal, keeping his mind locked in. everything served one purpose: to win and to stay at the very top of the world. It's crazy to think about how Dorian's mindset clashes with the rush we see today. While so many people look for shortcuts and quick results, Dorian kept reminding everyone that bodybuilding is a marathon, not a 100-meter sprint. He embraced solitude, sacrifice, and even pain because he knew the payoff would be something unique. How many times have you thought about giving up just because the results were taking too long? Maybe that's the most valuable lesson we can take from him. In the end, Dorian Yates' philosophy goes way beyond the Mr. Olympia stage. It makes us reflect on life itself. Are we really willing to cut out the unnecessary to chase our biggest dreams? What truly set Dorian apart from his rivals wasn't just his massive physique, it was the way he trained. Inspired by guys like Arthur Jones and Mike Mentzer, he dove deep into the concept of HIIT, high-intensity training. But as always, Dorian didn't just copy and paste. He took the idea, experimented, molded it, and created what the world came to know as blood and guts. While most bodybuilders believed in spending endless hours at the gym grinding through set after set, Yates went in the opposite direction. For him, it wasn't about quantity, it was about quality. Every exercise revolved around one goal: taking the muscle to complete failure. That meant instead of doing 5 or 6 working sets, Dorian did just one, but that one was pushed past the limit until the body couldn't respond anymore. Before that all-out set, he used 2 to 3 progressive warm-ups. And these weren't just to heat up the muscles, they were to lock in his focus. He gradually loaded the bar until he hit the max weight he'd use. When the main set came, there was zero room for error. Every rep had to be perfect, carried out all the way to total failure. That's when the brutal part began. The real secret of Dorian's training was going beyond no. He didn't stop when his body said it was done. Quite the opposite. That's where the real battle started. He used techniques like forced reps, rest pause, drop sets, and negatives, always with a training partner to squeeze out every ounce of strength left. Every session turned into a war against his own limits. It wasn't just training, it was survival. His routine was simple but surgical. 4 days a week were enough to destroy and rebuild his whole body. Monday was shoulders, triceps, and abs. Tuesday, back. Thursday, chest and biceps. Friday, legs. Each muscle group was trained once a week, but with so much intensity that it needed days to recover. He believed growth didn't happen inside the gym, but outside it. The workout was just the trigger. Among all exercises, one earned special fame: the bent-over row with a reverse grip, which later became known as the Yates row. That variation became his trademark, along with his heavy use of hammer strength and Nautilus machines, which allowed him to isolate muscles safely even under extreme loads. Plenty of athletes copied these methods later, but very few could squeeze the same results out of them as Dorian did. Blood and guts wasn't just a workout, it was a mindset. Proof that you don't need to spend your whole day in the gym to build a legendary physique. What you need is intensity, discipline, and the courage to stare pain in the face and not back down. Dorian Yates never wanted to be remembered as a powerlifter, but as a bodybuilder. Still, it's impossible to talk about him without pointing out his insane strength. He wasn't chasing 1-rep max records because he believed that wasn't efficient for muscle growth. But when you look at the numbers he was putting up in his day-to-day training, it's obvious he was on a whole different level. One of the movements that defined his career, as mentioned before, was the Yates row. This exercise became one of his signatures not just because of the brutal back development it delivered, but also because of the ridiculous weights he used. Dorian rode up to 405 pounds, 183 kilos, until, in 1994, he tore his biceps during one of those sets. Even after the injury, he kept rowing with about 375 pounds, 170 kilos, numbers that intimidate even elite athletes. On the bench press, his approach was just as impressive. He preferred variations that hammered the chest instead of the ego. On the incline bench, he pressed around 425 pounds, 192 kilos, for 8 clean reps, with perfect control of the bar. On the decline bench, the weight climbed even higher, reaching about 500 pounds, 226 kilos. For Dorian, it was never just about moving heavy iron. It was about making the muscle work through every inch of the movement. Another example of his strength was in the deadlift. an exercise most people instantly link to powerlifting. But Dorian adapted it to hammer his lower back, not to turn training into a strength contest. Even so, he was knocking out solid reps with around 405 pounds, 183 kilos, using a continuous tension style that very few could replicate with the same consistency. When it came to legs, the numbers were just as insane. On the leg press, Dorian pushed 1,260 pounds, 573 kilos, for 10 to 12 reps, always after pre-exhausting his quads on the leg extension. Then he'd move on to hack squats, where he loaded up a brutal 600 pounds, 272 kilos, for sets of 8 to 10. And keep in mind, these weren't max-out days. These were the kind of weights he used week after week, always to failure. For traps, Dorian once again pushed past normal limits. He shrugged 650 pounds, 294 kilos, building that trademark thickness that made his upper body look like armor. To round things out, he'd crank the leg extension up to about 270 pounds, 122 kilos, and for calves, one of the hardest muscle groups to grow, he did standing calf raises with an unreal 1,300 pounds, 589 kilos, on his shoulders. No wonder his calves were considered some of the best ever seen on a Mr. Olympia stage. But the numbers don't stop there. His contest stats were borderline superhuman. At 5 feet 10 inches, 1.77 meters, he walked on stage weighing 265 to 267 pounds, 120 to 121 kilos, and in the off-season, he bulked up to around 290 pounds, 131 kilos. His chest measured between 56 to 58 inches, 142 to 148 centimeters, while his arms taped at 20 to 21 inches, 50 to 54 centimeters, bigger than most people's thighs. His legs hit 32 inches, 81 centimeters, around, calves between 20 to 22 inches, 50 to 56 centimeters, and despite all that mass, he kept a tight waist of 34 to 38 inches, 86 to 96 centimeters, locking in that perfect V-taper. These proportions stood out even more because Dorian wasn't the tallest guy on stage. His secret was density, muscle layered over muscle with no empty space. His body looked carved from stone, combining raw power with precise aesthetics. That blend made it clear he wasn't just lifting weights. He was sculpting a living work of art. It's worth noting that all these numbers came inside his training philosophy. Dorian wasn't trying to prove anything by chasing one-rep records. For him, the weight was just a tool, a means to the bigger goal, building the most complete, imposing physique possible. That's exactly what makes his stats even more impressive. They were the natural byproduct of discipline, not showboating. At the end of the day, Dorian Yates' numbers aren't just cold stats. They're the reflection of an unshakable mindset from a man who believed every rep, every pound lifted, was part of a bigger process. And if his training was the definition of intensity, his diet was the definition of discipline. Just like everything else in his life, he treated nutrition like science. No guesswork, no shortcuts. Every meal was planned, every gram measured, nothing left to chance. He knew there was no point training like a warrior if you didn't fuel your body the right way to grow and recover. In the off-season, his goal was to eat between 6,000 and 7,000 calories a day, spread over 5 to 6 well-structured meals. For the average person, that amount of food sounds absurd, but for a 265-plus pound physique, it was exactly what it took to maintain size and strength. Each meal kept his metabolism firing and his muscles constantly fed. During contest prep, everything shifted. Dorian cut his calories down to around 4,000 a day, adjusting carbs to strip off fat while holding onto muscle. Even then, his diet stayed clean and precise. No cheats, no slips. He knew that every detail could mean the difference between winning and losing under the bright lights of the Olympia stage. Protein was the backbone of his diet. Egg whites, chicken breast, and lean red meat made up the core of his meals. Carbs came mainly from oats and brown rice, staples in both off-season and cutting phases, with just the amounts tweaked depending on his goals. Fats were kept low, reflecting the 90s mindset that minimizing dietary fat was the key to staying lean and tight. But more than quantity, the real key was consistency. Dorian kept protein intake high year-round to make sure his muscles always had the raw material to recover and grow from those brutal sessions. Eating, for him, wasn't about pleasure, it was strategy. Every plate of food was a piece of a bigger puzzle, each one locked into place to build the final product. One of the most legendary physiques in bodybuilding history. That routine demanded almost military-level discipline. There was no room for winging it, no grabbing random food just because he was hungry. Every snack, every meal, every shake was scheduled down to the minute. In the end, his diet proves that bodybuilding isn't just about lifting weights. It's about turning your body into a precision machine where training, rest, and nutrition all work together in perfect sync. The nickname The Shadow sums up exactly who Dorian Yates was. While his rivals chased fame, interviews, and constant appearances, he chose to live far from the spotlight. His presence was almost ghost-like. He would suddenly show up at a contest, dominate the stage with absolute authority, and then vanish again. That mysterious behavior only fueled more respect and curiosity around his name. But his influence went way beyond the stage. Dorian was the man who popularized HIIT in professional bodybuilding, proving that you could train with low volume, maximum intensity, and still build freakish results. His philosophy inspired entire generations, gave birth to methods like dog crap and max OT, and forever changed the way athletes and regular gym-goers approach training. He was also the one who officially kicked off the mass monster era, bodybuilders with proportions so unreal that they looked carved from another world, dense, massive, and detailed all at once. Before Dorian, that kind of muscle volume paired with razor-sharp conditioning seemed impossible. After him, it became the new standard, and that's why so many call him the bridge between classic bodybuilding and the modern era. Offstage, his life took some interesting turns too. Dorian married Brazilian fitness athlete Gal Ferreira Yates, creating a special bond with Brazil. Over the years, he's been to the country multiple times for seminars, workshops, and leisure, building a strong connection with the Brazilian fitness community and winning even more fans there. After his retirement, forced by injuries that made it impossible to keep competing, Dorian never stopped training. He kept himself in shape, athletic and healthy, but without the obsessive aesthetics that defined his pro career. Today, his body isn't that of a Mr. Olympia anymore, but rather one of balance, health, well-being, and vitality, without needing to prove anything to anyone. These days, Dorian works as a coach, speaker, and entrepreneur. He shares his knowledge at events, runs courses, and continues to inspire people worldwide. His mission isn't just about bodybuilding anymore. It's about passing on the philosophy of discipline and resilience that guided him throughout his life. That's how he shows that a champion's legacy goes far beyond the trophies. The story of Dorian Yates proves he wasn't just a champion. He was a game changer. He didn't get into bodybuilding to copy formulas, but to create a new standard. His methodical discipline, almost superhuman intensity, and absolute dedication forever transformed the way athletes and fans view the art of building a physique. From a troubled young man who faced prison and an uncertain future, he reinvented himself and climbed all the way to the top as a six-time Mr. Olympia. That's living proof that it doesn't matter where you start. What matters is how far you're willing to go. His life is a living example of resilience, discipline, and overcoming obstacles, qualities that go way beyond the stage and can inspire anyone in any area of life. The lesson Dorian leaves behind is simple but powerful. It's not about doing more, it's about doing better. Every workout, every meal, every choice was driven by method, consistency, and intensity. That's the difference between being just another face in the crowd and becoming unforgettable. And maybe that's the reflection you can take for your own life. Are you just going through the motions, or are you really giving your best? Now I want to hear from you. What part of Dorian Yates' story impressed you the most? Was it his brutal training philosophy, his insane strength numbers, or his discipline away from the stage? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I love seeing how each person connects with these stories. If this video inspired you in any way, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. And if you want to support our work even further, consider becoming a channel member to get access to exclusive content and perks. Your support is what allows us to keep bringing you stories like this every single week. Oh, and of course, make sure you're subscribed if you aren't already. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any new uploads. We're always diving deep into the lives and journeys of the biggest names in bodybuilding and sports. And to keep the momentum going, I invite you to check out the next video that's already up here on the screen. Just click it and dive into another incredible story that's guaranteed to inspire you. Big hug, and I'll see you in the next one.